I didn't realize how insane it was until I saw the chandelier. It was one of those hotel ballrooms they only use for weddings and oil conferences. 3 stories high, gold trim everywhere, champagne pyramids on mirrored tables. The kind of place where one night's lighting bill could pay someone's rent for a year. And above it all, hanging dead center, was this ridiculous crystal chandelier the size of a small car, throwing light over suits and sequins and an 8-piece band. And I was standing there in my off-the-rack navy suit, thinking, I paid for this, not metaphorically, literally. My boss had called it a temporary cash flow bridge. Company card limit was in transition. Accounting was processing the new credit line. The hotel needed something on file today. I had the highest personal limit on my card out of the leadership team. So 3 weeks ago, I'd sat in my apartment at midnight, handshaking just a little, and typed my card number into a payment portal, while my boss said, "It's fine, Ethan. It'll all be reimbursed once the Q4 funds clear. You're saving the day here, man." The invoice had said 48,320 Samskers. So yeah, looking up at that chandelier, I could tell you exactly how many hours of my life it represented. "Ethan, you made it." Martin's voice cut through the music before I saw him. He had that CEO laugh turned up to 11 already. A little too loud, a little too polished. He squeezed my shoulder like we were old friends and not the man who signed my performance reviews. "Would have been weird if I didn't," I said, considering. He didn't flinch. "Listen, about that. Relax. Accounting's got your reimbursement in the pipeline. Tonight's about celebrating, not spreadsheets." He grinned wider, the kind of grin people practice in the mirror. "Grab a drink. Mingle. Big night." Big night for what exactly was the part no one had explained. The invitation had just said, "Executive Appreciation and Q4 Outlook. Formal attire. Spouses welcome." There'd been no mention of what we were appreciating, which was odd, because there was only one thing we'd been working on hard enough to justify a party like this, the Harrowfield deal. Harrowfield had been my life for the last 11 months. Calls at 2 a.m. with London, 3 weekends in Dallas, 2 Thanksgiving dinners eaten from plastic boxes in airport lounges. Harrowfield was the reason my girlfriend left, the reason my mother joked that I live in that little rectangle, when she called and saw the blue glow on my face. And last week, Harrowfield was the deal that died. At least, that's what Martin had told me. "They walked," he'd said in my office, door closed, voice heavy with regret. "Market conditions, internal politics on their side. You know how it is. Not your fault. You did everything you could." He'd patted my desk once, the way you'd pat a dog, and added, "We'll talk next steps. Just take the weekend. Get your head straight." I'd gone home that night and stared at my kitchen table for 2 hours. 11 months of work, gone. And then his email about the party came through, cheerful and bright, like we were celebrating a funeral. So as I stood just inside the ballroom doors, tie a little too tight, my brain couldn't line up the facts. Dead deal, lavish party, big night. The bar was already 3 people deep. Faces I'd only ever seen on Teams calls were suddenly 3-dimensional, laughing with teeth too white, holding glasses they let other people refill. The band slid into some jazz standard. Waiters floated around with trays of tiny food that vanished the second they passed any group of more than 2 people. "Dude, you okay?" A hand tapped my elbow. It was Noah, one of my analysts, 20-something, hair too perfect to be accidental, tie slightly crooked, like he'd done it in an Uber. He looked at me like he wasn't sure if he should congratulate me or offer condolences, which was funny because, as far as I knew, we'd just taken the biggest L of my career. "Yeah," I said, "just taking it in." "Right?" He whistled low. "I knew they said nice venue, but this is obscene." "Don't say that too loud," I muttered. "Obscene is probably on the invoice as a line item." He laughed. Then his eyes flicked past me. "Oh, they're almost ready." "Ready for what?" But he was already backing away. Gotta go, man. They want us up near the front for the announcement. Announcement. The word slid into my head and sat there heavy. I followed the flow of bodies toward the stage. There was a long LED screen behind the band, cycling through generic corporate wallpaper. Our logo, stock photos of city skylines, and smiling office workers from nowhere in particular. In front of it stood a narrow podium with a mic, a cluster of wireless clickers, and a table with little glass awards covered by black cloth. I hadn't made those awards. No one had asked me to help design the deck. I hadn't even seen a slide, which was weird because Martin loved looping me in on anything that touched strategy. He'd tell people, Ethan's my numbers guy and my narrative guy. Now I was just another suit in the crowd, standing behind a table where someone had left a half-finished Prosecco. Ladies and gentlemen, the band faded out as one of our HR directors took the mic, voice booming through the room. If I could have your attention for just a moment before we continue this incredible evening. Conversations dimmed, but didn't die. The open bar was working. Someone laughed too loud behind me, then hushed themselves when HR smiled in their direction. We are so thrilled to have you all here tonight to celebrate an extraordinary year and an extraordinary team. In just a few minutes, our CEO, Martin Blake, will be sharing some exciting news about the future of our company. She paused for polite applause. It came on cue. But first, let's take a quick look at what you all have accomplished together. The lights dipped. The LED screen flared brighter, the logo shrinking to a corner as the first slide came up. Glossy photos of our offices, our people, captions like resilience and innovation floating over them. My stomach twisted. I knew this format. This was a victory lap deck. Except, as far as I knew, we hadn't won the race. The slides rolled on. Regional revenues. New hires. That charity run Martin loved to talk about because he could post sweaty photos on LinkedIn and call it leadership. All the surface level stuff you throw at investors and bored spouses. And then the slide changed, and everything in me went very, very still. Across the entire width of the screen, in big white letters on a dark blue background, were 3 words. Harrowfield Partners signed underneath. Smaller text I had to squint to read. 5-year strategic partnership. Projected revenue, 120 pebs. I felt my fingers tighten around the stem of the abandoned Prosecco glass without meaning to. The room blurred for a second, my brain trying to find some other word than signed. Some explanation like renewed talks, or prospect, or target. But no, they'd picked that verb on purpose. Signed. Someone behind me whooped. Another voice muttered, "Holy shit," in the half-awed way people reserve for someone else's lottery ticket. My mouth felt dry. I hadn't been on a Harrowfield call in a week. My last email thread with their team ended with, "Given current constraints, we'll have to revisit in Q2, if at all." I'd stared at that line until the text blurred. Now there it was. Deal signed. Fireworks graphics in the corners. The next slide was a photo. Harrowfield's CFO, 2 of their board members, and Martin, all standing behind a table, pen in hand, document between them. Martin was mid-laugh, eyes crinkled, the picture of humble triumph. I did not remember that meeting. I had not been invited to that room. Down in the corner of the screen was a credit line. Photo courtesy of Harrowfield Partners HQ, Dallas. Dallas! I'd practically lived in that city this year. I knew the layout of their offices better than my own. I could tell from the bland art on the wall behind them exactly which conference room this was. Martin had flown out there without me. My heart thumped once, hard, like it was trying to knock its way out of my chest. The Prosecco glass knocked against the table with a tiny chime. No one turned. Everyone was looking up. HR's voice floated over the microphone again, a little smug edge she probably didn't even realize she had. "That's right," she said. "Tonight, we're not just celebrating each other. We are celebrating the official signing of the Harrowfield Partnership, a game-changing moment for this company." Applause washed over the room. People clapped because everyone else was clapping. Some of them probably didn't even know what Harrowfield was, but they knew the word partnership. They knew game-changing. I just knew that last week in my office behind a closed door, Martin had looked me in the eye and said the deal was dead. On the stage, he stepped up to the mic to take over, smoothing his tie like a politician. The screen behind him froze on that photo, him and Harrowfield, smiling over a contract. 11 months of my life boiled down to a background image. From where I stood, I could see the very bottom of the slide, where the names were listed in small print, like movie credits. Harrowfield executive sponsors, our executive sponsors. My own name wasn't there. I didn't move at first. It felt like my body had to finish buffering what my eyes had already seen. The clapping faded into conversations. Excited, relieved, drunk on someone else's success, and all I could hear was a thin, sharp ringing behind my ribs. People brushed past me to get closer to the stage, to congratulate Martin, to be part of whatever this was. I stayed exactly where I was, fingers still resting on the stem of that unfinished Prosecco glass, like it was the only stable object in the room. And that probably would have been the end of it, me standing there stuck between disbelief and stupidity, if I hadn't heard my name, not from the mic, from behind me. "Yeah, Reynolds is out after Q1 for sure," a man said casually. "They're repositioning the workflow. His role becomes redundant when the automation rollout hits." My last name. Said with the same tone you'd use for someone's parking spot. I didn't turn. I listened. A second man snorted. "Redundant? Just say they're cutting him. Martin's been hinting at it for months." "Months?" The first man laughed softly. "Well, not officially. You know how optics are. But once Harrowfield came back to the table, they didn't want him involved. Apparently he's too operational, not enough strategic," Martin's words. My heartbeat slowed in a strange, heavy way. Not panic. Something quieter, colder. They kept talking. "Shame, though," the second guy added. "He basically built the damn pitch. But hey, wrong personality for big league deals. Clients want polish." I finally turned. Two mid-level directors in suits too expensive for their titles were sipping whiskey near one of the tall cocktail tables, laughing like they were discussing the weather. When I moved, they looked up, startled, then quickly pretended they hadn't noticed me at all. They shifted into a different conversation mid-sentence, the way people do when they realize the person they're talking about is standing 3 feet away. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I stepped away, weaving through the crowd with that strange, steady calm spreading through me like cooling metal. Redundant. Too operational. Not enough strategic. Words said in some room I wasn't invited into. Words said while I was drafting the 37th revision of a proposal they used without me. As I pushed past a group taking selfies, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A calendar alert for a meeting I'd been kicked out of earlier that week, moved to executive only. I dismissed it without looking. At the edge of the ballroom, away from the lights and the band and the staged applause, I spotted someone who always told the truth, without meaning to. Linda, from finance. She was standing by the open bar, swirling a gin and tonic, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Linda didn't sugarcoat anything, and she didn't play politics. She survived the company by being quietly indispensable and aggressively uninterested in gossip. I walked up beside her. "Did you know?" I asked, voice low. She didn't act surprised, just exhaled, long and slow. "About the deal or the party?" "Both." She pressed her lips together for a moment. "I knew the deal wasn't dead." My stomach tightened. "How long?" "Since Monday." She glanced at me. "They routed the flight charges through Martin's discretionary account. He flew to Dallas Sunday night. I assumed you knew." I didn't. Her expression softened in a way that felt worse than anger. "Ethan, I'm sorry. Why wasn't I told?" She hesitated, looked around us, leaned in the slightest bit. Because Harrowfield asked for a different point of contact for final negotiations, someone more aligned with the long-term vision. Their words. Martin, I said flatly. She nodded. And once that happened, he froze you out. He had to. Otherwise, it'd look inconsistent. I didn't laugh, but the breath that left my chest felt like a broken version of one, so I wasn't even considered an asset, just an inconsistency. Linda winced. It's not fair. You did the work. Everyone knows that. Everyone except the people on stage. She didn't argue. A roar of applause swelled again as Martin clicked to another slide. The sound washed over us, hollow and bright. Linda, I said quietly, off the record, am I being cut? She didn't look at me. She looked at her drink, then at my tie, then somewhere over my shoulder, like she was choosing the least cruel angle. They're restructuring in March, she said. 2 director roles, 1 senior manager. Yours is on the list. She swallowed. I thought they would have told you before tonight. You thought wrong. We stood in silence for a few seconds. All around us, people were laughing, clinking glasses, celebrating a future I apparently wasn't in. Then Linda added, soft but direct. There's more. I felt the shift before she spoke the words. That draft slide deck you made in October, the big strategy one? Yes, I said slowly. They're using it. I blinked. What do you mean, using it? They took your version, stripped the metadata, removed your name from the document properties, and rebuilt the template around it. It's the core of the presentation they're giving to the board next week. I stared at her. Martin said it needed to look team-driven, she added. I felt something settle inside me. Not rage, not despair, a decision. I set down the untouched Prosecco glass. Thanks for telling me, I said. She nodded, eyes worried. Ethan, what are you going to do? But that was just the beginning. I walked back toward the center of the ballroom, and for the first time all night, I stopped feeling like the room was happening to me. Now I was happening to it. Somewhere on that stage, hidden behind static slides and polite applause, was the truth they didn't want anyone to see, because buried under this celebration was a structure built on a lie, and Martin had no idea that he had just handed me the perfect angle to take the whole thing apart, and I hadn't even raised my voice yet. I didn't head toward the stage. Not yet. You don't walk into a burning room until you know where all the exits are. The ballroom looked different now, same glitter, same music, same expensive shine. But something under the surface had shifted. Conversations felt sharper. The lights felt hotter. My senses were too clear, too precise, like my mind had switched into a mode it hadn't used in years. I took a slow lap around the room. Everyone looked relaxed, oblivious. Champagne flutes. Laughter. Someone dropping a canapé and pretending they didn't. CEOs shaking hands with men who owned bigger companies than ours. The kind of people who say things like capital synergy without flinching. And then, near the far side of the ballroom, I found exactly what I needed. A tech booth. Simple setup. Laptop, sound mixer, HDMI switch. A bored-looking events technician who was scrolling through his phone and pretending he didn't hate corporate functions. I approached him with the kind of confidence only someone on the guest list could get away with. Hey, I said casually, quick question. Are you running the main deck from here or from your laptop? He gestured lazily to the company laptop plugged into the big monitor. This one. They sent it earlier. Mind if I take a quick look? I'm presenting later and want to make sure they're using the updated file. He barely looked at me. Yeah, go ahead. He moved aside, just like that. Corporate events run on one rule. If you look like you belong, no one stops you. I clicked open the presentation folder. There it was. Harrowfield Final Signing Master. V12, PPTX, modified 2 days ago. By Martin Blake. I opened it. Slide after slide. My structure, my model, my language. Even the color-coded risk assessment table I'd built at 3 a.m. in a Dallas Marriott was right there. Only now it had a slightly different font, so Martin could pretend it was his. But the real hit came 12 slides in. A chart labeled Projected Organizational Efficiency, Post-Harrowfield Integration. 3 roles were marked for Phase Out. One of them was mine. They had built their victory on my work and planned to cut me using the projections I had created. I closed the laptop gently like I was tucking in a child. The technician looked over. "Everything good?" I smiled politely. "Perfect." Because it was. I walked away, feeling the first crackle of something electric under my skin. A current, not anger. It had burned out already. Something colder, focused. I knew what pressure point to hit, and it was standing near the center of the ballroom, talking to a cluster of investors like a groom at his own wedding. Martin. Even from a distance, he looked proud, important. A man who believed the universe had finally acknowledged his genius. He threw his head back at something one of the investors said, laughing big and loud, shoulders relaxed, drink in hand. He didn't see me walking toward him. He didn't see the room narrowing around him, the edges tightening. But he felt it when I stepped into the circle. His eyes flicked to me, confused, then mildly annoyed. He was already calculating how to usher me away politely. "Ethan," he said brightly, "you enjoying yourself?" "Parts of it," I said. The investors smiled at me in the vague, distracted way rich people smile at people they don't plan to remember. Martin clapped my shoulder too hard. "Gentlemen, this is Ethan Reynolds, one of our operations leads, brilliant with numbers, real backbone of the team." "Oh," one investor said mildly. "Were you part of the Harrowfield workstream?" Martin answered before I could, a fraction too quickly. He supported early modeling, yes, but the final negotiations were mostly handled by our senior executives. Multi-pronged effort, you know how it is. My jaw tightened just slightly, not enough for anyone to see. "That's interesting," I said quietly, because I saw the deck. Martin froze, just for half a heartbeat, but it was enough. The investors looked between us, curious now. "You used my October strategy draft," I continued. "Slide 12 still has my risk thresholds. You didn't even change the order of the scoring." Martin's smile faltered, then rearranged itself into something softer, patronizing. "Ethan, this isn't the place. But the part I found fascinating," I said, talking over him calmly, "is that you also use my organizational projections, the ones outlining which roles would become redundant once the partnership stabilized." Martin's face flushed. "Ethan, and you use those projections," I finished softly, "to justify cutting me." The investors went still. The music continued, the lights glittered, the champagne flowed, but everything within 2 meters of us froze like we were standing inside a snow globe. One of the investors, a man with silver hair and a reputation for tearing apart CEOs, turned to Martin. "Is that true?" Martin laughed, brittle and sharp. "Of course not. Ethan is misunderstanding internal modeling. It's complex." I reached into my inner jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. Tapped it once. On the tech booth laptop, the presentation switched. The ballroom LED screen snapped away from Martin's smiling face and pulled up the slide I'd prepared on my walkover, the same slide that had nearly ended my career. Projected organizational efficiency, post-Harrowfield. Integration, 3 names, 3 roles, highlighted in red. A small gas fluttered through the crowd nearest the stage. I mirrored the screen, I said quietly. "Backup controls." They left it open. Martin's eyes went wide. "Turn that off. Ethan, turn it off." I didn't. Instead, I enlarged it. Every pair of eyes in the room turned toward the screen. Conversations died mid-sentence. The band slowly faded out on instinct. Investor voices rose. "Why are these roles listed for removal?" "You didn't mention restructuring during negotiations. You said the team was stable." "This contradicts your Q3 forecast. Did you hide workforce reductions during due diligence?" Martin opened and closed his mouth. He wasn't sweating yet, but he would. I stepped back, letting the investors circle him. They smelled blood, and Martin, for the first time since I'd met him, looked truly cornered. But I wasn't finished. I leaned in close enough that only he could hear me. You could have cut me, I murmured. You could have benched me. You could have shut me out. I would have walked away quietly. His breathing hitched. But you stole from me, I said. You used my work and erased my name. That's the one line you don't cross with people like me. He swallowed. What? What do you want? He whispered. I almost smiled. Nothing, I said. This part isn't for me. I glanced at the investors, now pulling him aside, questions growing sharper, louder. This part, I said softly, is for you. He stared at me like he finally understood something he should have realized years ago, that quiet people are only quiet because noise isn't necessary, not until it is. And then the night truly began to collapse around him. The moment the investors pulled Martin away, the ballroom changed temperature. Not literally, but the air shifted, thinned, like someone had lifted the ceiling and let the night pour straight in. People pretended not to stare, but they stared. I walked toward the back of the room, not rushing, not looking over my shoulder. If there is a moment in a man's life when he stops being afraid of consequences, this was mine. Not because I felt untouchable, because the truth was finally louder than I was. At the edge of the ballroom, beside a curtain that hid the catering staff, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Step outside, now! No name, no context, but I knew who it was. I slipped out through the side terrace doors into cool night air. A private balcony wrapped around the building, empty except for a single man leaning against the railing, looking out over the city like he owned it. He did, at least a piece of it. Richard Hale, primary investor, old money, sharp mind, famously impatient. He didn't look at me when I approached. Walk with me, he said. We moved along the terrace in silence for a bit. The muffled swell of ballroom noise pressed against the glass behind us, chaos contained in gold. Tell me exactly what happened, Hale said finally. I did. No theatrics, no embellishment, just facts. The dead deal. The sudden resurrection. Being excluded. My work used. My role cut. The slide. The truth. When I finished, Hale sighed once, slow and heavy. Blake thought he could hide this, he murmured. He's been corner-cutting for years, but this is stupidity, mixed with ego. He looked at me then, really looked. And you, he said, are the first person in 3 years to hand me the truth without worrying about whose feelings get hurt. I didn't respond. I'll be direct, he continued. If the numbers in that deck are yours, and we both know they are, you're the one who kept this deal from collapsing last summer. That's what I tried to do, I said. He nodded. Blake told us it was him. Of course he had. Hale rested both hands on the railing. I don't reward dishonesty, and I don't tolerate leaders who hide risk. His jaw flexed. Blake will be gone by the end of the week. A quiet, clean statement. Not dramatic, not angry. Just final. I let that settle. But before I could speak, he added, and I want you to take his place. The words hit me harder than the entire evening. I'm not, I began. You are, he cut in. I've watched your reports, your revisions, your projections. You have the discipline he lacks, and the restraint. It's clearer now than ever. I exhaled once, steady. I appreciate the offer, I said, but no. A pause. You're turning down the corner office? He asked, almost amused. I'm turning down everything that comes with it, I said. I'm done carrying the weight for people who take credit and dodge consequences. I'm done waking up at 3 a.m. because a client wants to circle back for the third time. The city lights reflected in the terrace glass. Only then did I realize how tired I truly was. Tired in a way no promotion could fix. I want a clean exit, I said simply. A severance package reflective of the work I've done, not the title I held. Full credit in the Harrowfield documentation, and the freedom to walk out of that building with my head up. Hale studied me. Then he chuckled softly. You know, Reynolds, people usually beg for power. You're asking to be paid and left alone. That's all I want. He nodded once. Done. Just like that. HR will send you paperwork tomorrow, he added. You'll have everything you asked for. And Ethan, yes? When you're ready to run something of your own, call me. I don't invest in people often. Tonight, you earned it. He walked back inside. The terrace door shut behind him with a soft click. For a long moment, I stayed alone under the night sky. The music inside had shifted to something slower, muted by glass and distance. My hands rested lightly on the railing. My breathing felt different, softer. I didn't feel triumphant, or victorious, or vindicated. I felt quiet, like the ground beneath me had finally stopped shaking. When I eventually stepped back into the ballroom, Martin wasn't on stage anymore. The investors had let him out through a service corridor, and the band was trying desperately to liven the room again. People whispered, glancing around like an earthquake might start under their feet next. Linda caught my eye from across the room. She didn't smile. She just nodded once. You're done here? Go. So I did. I walked out through the front doors of the ballroom without looking back. The chandelier still shimmered overhead. Rainbows caught in 1,000 pieces of glass. It didn't impress me anymore. It didn't intimidate me. It was just a light bulb with delusions of grandeur. Outside, the air was colder, cleaner. I loosened my tie and let the night settle over me. My phone buzzed, a final alert from the calendar I no longer needed. I swiped it away. Tomorrow I would sign papers, seal the exit, close the door. But right now, in this exact moment, I realized something simple and freeing. Peace doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives in silence when the last connection to the wrong place finally snaps loose. I walked toward the street, hands in my pockets, breathing steady. Behind me, the party raged on without me. Ahead of me, for the first time in years, was a life that actually felt like mine.